WebDirect's one of the things they really seem to focus on in this release too. Just like looking through the notes myself right now, it's one of the bigger sections, right, is just what did they do to WebDirect? So I've not gotten to play with that too much yet, but if half of these improvements are as good as they sound, that's going to be really good for a lot of our clients.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for getting online for the meeting this morning. I think we're doing one of the DevCast this morning, talking a little bit about some FileMaker 2026 features. I've got one in mind that I wrote a blog post about. And should we just go around? Anybody want to volunteer to go first? I suppose I could if nobody else wants to.
Oh, no, I
Nick,
can.
Nick,
Mine's pretty
Nick's
quick.
volunteers.
Um, so by and by large, I mean, this release to me felt like it was pretty much just setting up the next release. A lot of things, gearing up for, more AI integration or, having the AI be able to edit more. So there isn't really a specific feature that you can use live in FileMaker that I'm super excited about. But one thing that I do like, and I just started experimenting with, is with the FileMaker server installer, with the newest version, 26, you can install the command line tools only instead of the entire server package. So you can install it, on just a regular Windows machine. I mean, technically you could do that before anyway, but it wasn't supported. But now you can actually install the command line tools from the, FileMaker server package directly on a Windows machine and experiment away, with the updated pipeline to being able to edit FileMaker files with
Yes.
AI in the next release, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, that ties pretty tightly into some experimenting I was doing with the build file command line function that they introduced.
Hmm.
Um, I had, and this is all in a blog post I wrote. So if anybody's read that blog post, there, I'll be repeating myself. But I was watching a video stream that had Vince Bonanno and Hanzo in it from Two for You, and that one of them made a passing comment about maybe the build file function being a way of taking a file that had been recovered, and then where the customer had continued to use it, to take that file, save as XML, use the build file function on the XML to get yourself back to a file that didn't violate FileMaker Claris's standing best practices, which is never to use a recovered file. The best practice is if there's a file corruption, you grab your latest backup, you grab a clone, a known good clone, you export whatever data you can get out of the recovered file, and you import all the data into a known good clone or import it into the backup so that you're never using the recovered file. But as we, I think, all know, that's not what our clients are doing. I doubt that very many of the inherited solutions we work with have been recovered less than a couple of times at least. And so there's no way to have a known good, application in those cases. And so anyway, that was an intriguing possibility. And so I did a bunch of experimenting. And I have to say, my old reaction to FileMaker, like the migration tool, some of the other tools we use all the time. My old reaction to some of those would have been, oh, it's command line. Do they have to do it in command line? Now my reaction, because of the AI revolution we're in, now my reaction is, oh, a command line tool lets me tell the AI, tell the large language model what to do with it, and I don't have to really do any of the heavy lifting, and it's actually better, I think. So I did a bunch of experimenting with, and it's in the blog post, so I'm not going to repeat myself entirely, but I did a whole bunch of experimenting with a large language model that shall not be named, and told it I want to do some testing. So I created a bunch of save XMLs for different solutions, had the model do a bunch of work on them, and um, analyze the results. And from the standpoint of getting to a non-recovered file, if that's your goal, it didn't really prove out. I hope Claris comes out with a version 2 of this product, because I think some of what I ran into is just someone didn't test it with very large files. Because I ran into problems fairly quickly with really large XML files. Um, but it worked great with small ones. And because it worked great, I did a save as XML with a small file, used the build file command to create a new FileMaker file from it, an FMP12 file, and then I opened it in FileMaker. Working FileMaker database. I didn't test this, but I'm pretty sure I could have told, or I'm sorry, the model that shall not be named. I'm pretty sure I could have told it, hey, change the title of that object on that layout there and regenerate the file. And I don't know why it wouldn't have worked. I didn't test it. So if Claris is moving in that direction, this seems like a pretty solid first step. And to be successful on that front, they're going to have to make it work with larger files anyway. So either direction, it seems like a really positive development, a powerful new tool, so to speak.
Absolutely. But even just being able to, like even if you've defined the fields already, in like a planning diagram, or like draw IO for a flowchart, or markdown file in Visual Studio Code, like in a different environment where you've got different methods of being able to just input what you're thinking faster, and you have all the fields as bullet points. If it's all already spelled out, you just need to recreate in FileMaker, but the GUI in FileMaker to do that is kind of slow. And the keyboard shortcuts aren't that great. Sometimes tab gets me into the little thing I need to hit plus on in order to get to the additional option. Sometimes it doesn't. So if I've already got it all figured out, like in a markdown file, for example, if I could just tell whichever AI, hey, use the pipeline to build this thing, that would be fantastic.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Fingers crossed we're getting closer to that. I mean, it seems clear that I think it seems clear that build file function is that's the direction it's going.
Yeah, I think a lot of I think
What was that?
the command line stuff in general is some of the most consequential upgrades that we're seeing from 26 right now, or at least the one of the stronger foundations for what could come, right? Like I really like the idea of being able to change passwords over the command line just for automation and credential rotation. But then you also have what you guys were talking about with save as XML over the command line and whatnot, being able to build files. So I'm really happy that they've done that, and I'm excited for what that might mean, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't have all the features just yet that I would love to see in that, but it's enough of a taste of it that it's got me really excited.
I'm like I said, I'm a lot more excited about command line tools than I used to be. Um, that being able to integrate that into some of our internal tools, like you're working on, Evan, is pretty exciting.
I mean, really, I've only been using it for basically a couple days. But I've come to really like the just the changes to the interface, like the how they did the tabs on the side. It gets me directly where I want to go, but I want to see as soon as I'm, editing a layout. It took a little bit of getting used to, but now that I know kind of where, like my eyes just know where to look for specific objects in the inspectors, it it's helped me kind of streamline that, when I'm doing layout work. So it's made it a little bit easier. And I've already started my other thing that I really like is I've already started refactoring some solutions that use a lot of layered objects, for hide conditions and based on certain calculations to be able to consolidate those into one calculation has been really, or at least one or two calculations has been really nice. So I'm looking forward to really like taking advantage of that feature.
Yeah, that tying directly into that is the the new enterable by calculation
Yeah,
capability.
yeah.
That has some excellent possibilities for reducing the number of layered objects and reducing the complexity of some layouts where we've done things like layer non-enterable and enterable objects. That's a technique we've had to use a lot in the past. So enterability by calculation alongside visible by calculation. I feel like those two will lead to a good amount of simplification of, um, of layouts in some cases.
Especially with WebDirect, because I
Yeah.
didn't notice before, but with WebDirect loading everything, even if it's set to be hidden,
Yeah.
like it takes time.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Even a little bit better, more advantageous with WebDirect. And also layered objects just don't work as well in WebDirect. So um, that's a major bonus. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I think there's some fairly sizable FileMaker solutions out there in the wild that are primarily WebDirect solutions. I think that leads to Claris devoting a fair amount of attention to keeping it current, fast, and improving. I mean, just the fact that Claris put the engineering effort a few years ago into being able to support up to I think I forget what the current limit is, 500 concurrent users with multiple worker servers. Um, the fact that they put the effort into that tells you that there's some pretty big WebDirect solutions out there.
I was just looking through the release notes, and one thing I didn't realize, I didn't notice before, is they added sizes to custom dialogues. And that I don't know why I'm excited
Um,
about that, but I am.
I missed that one too.
Yeah, I think I did
Interesting.
too. Sometimes they're too small.
Yeah, yep. And or sometimes they're just too big, or they're a user will have two windows, and the dialogue will show up on the second window, and they're expecting it, on a first window. Like there's all sorts of scenarios to be able to control the sizing and spacing of a custom dialogue. So just that little thing is pretty helpful.
Yeah.
The worst one is when it appears, like say on the left monitor when you primarily use the right one,
Right?
and then you disconnect the left monitor.
Yeah.
The FileMaker remembers that position and keeps putting it there, even though you can't
Yeah.
see that after you don't have that monitor hooked up.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I've had to tell people or tell, clients how to reset their custom dialogue positions so many times. Like,
yep, same. That's pretty cool.
yeah.
I think for some people, the new remote backup and standby server options in FileMaker Server might be pretty helpful. I know we're already doing a lot of remote backup. All of our hosted stuff is obviously already remotely backed up, and we already have all that dialed in, documented, figured out. So I'm not sure how much we'll use it, but for clients that we all run into clients from time to time that have been. I just had a call with one yesterday, a small rowing club that's been hosting their own server for years and years and years, and I'm sure they're not doing offsite backup. So the ability to just flip a switch and have that working from inside FileMaker server seems like a pretty great backup improvement for some clients. And I know we're going to give the standby server a try on one of our servers just for educational purposes, whether we keep using it in the long run or not. But I know we've got Evan, you're in the process of getting one of our servers set up for testing on that, right?
Yeah, that'll all be done next week.
That'll be cool to try that in the real world and get a feel for how it's working for us. That's another one that for a smallish client that may not have the infrastructure or the IT staff or the outsourced IT staff to manage warm standby, hot standby, any kind of standby server. It seems like it could be a good disaster recovery option for some people.
Hey, I'm really interested in the persistent data. I know, Jillian, you had mentioned something about using that the other day. But do you have any other thoughts on that, now that you've kind of played around with it a little bit?
Well, I haven't exactly played around with it. I was watching a video that who's the fellow from Proofgeist. He was on with Richard Carlton talking about the new features. One of the interesting things that he mentioned was that he felt that persistent data would work even if you hadn't upgraded the server to 26. So as long as your clients are updated to 26, you can take advantage of this new catalog because essentially it's being stored in the app. And as long as you're not doing anything like perform script on server that's trying to interact with that data, and it's just clients, you can actually take advantage of that now. So some of the interesting ways that they suggested using it would be the primary advantage of it is if you need data to persist after a deployment. So if it isn't something that the user is going to be already has pre-filled, and it's something that you consistently need it as part of your solution, whether you're a reseller and you want to embed startup information that average users wouldn't have access to, but your scripts are utilizing. Todd was saying like they're going to be switching things like the proof kit and their other add-ons to basically utilizing that. And you don't really need an add-on. You can literally store gobs of information in this persistent data cache and access it through scripts. So he suggested other options would be like definitely if you needed to store some static HTML that then you were calling with a calculated field rather than having a field in a preferences table, or even basic preferences that never change, like company name, addresses, those things that we put on various different reports that we're maintaining a table with a record, and that information never changes or very rarely changes, and the user isn't the person changing the data. So he also suggested maybe using it for value lists that don't change, that again, where you wanted that data preloaded, that maybe you were storing it in a table format previously and like rebuilding value lists off of that. You can store JSON, you can store base 64. The only caveat really is that it is slightly slower to access than if the data was in a table. But the point was that you would have to be talking about really lots and lots of data for you to see a significant slowdown in data access versus, if you really need to use a table, use a table. So I thought those points were sort of interesting, especially, I've had a few situations where I had to throw in a preferences table for some of those HTML JavaScript things that I did, and the client didn't really need that preferences table, but I needed a place to store the basic HTML information, right? So, that's what's being used. Some of the other interesting things is that save as XML, you can just export that catalog. So you can just export the catalog of the persistent data if you want to see all of your, basically we're calling them buckets. So the way the persistent data works is you give it a name, and that name represents a bucket. In that bucket, you can then have multiple IDs, but the ID can also be a name. You don't have to think of it as a like UUID. You can give it a text name, and then that has a value. So that's your value pair inside of a bucket. Now you can, through that configure container data script, you can set the value in that ID that's in the bucket. and you can delete it, but you can't directly delete an entire bucket. So you have to individually delete any ID that you have within that bucket, and then the bucket will go away. And you can see I did a little experiment to verify that that's what happens by exporting that catalog. And when I had to make like a little loop script to basically, you can list all the values and then loop through your list, count how many values, loop through your list to delete each one. And then once all of them are gone, the bucket then is no longer there. So then you can recreate the bucket. Now the bucket, the name has to be unique. So you can't have multiple buckets, but you can have multiple IDs. I mean, you can reuse an ID name. So have like say bucket one is company information, and then you need company information two, and you have name, phone, email, whatever in the first bucket. You can still have name, email, phone in the second bucket. The ID of it doesn't have to be unique, just the name of that bucket.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's
So
cool. It
yeah.
sounds like there's a lot of
Seems
possibilities there.
seems like
I use a lot of helper files currently when I'm, pushing data around, especially during deployments or, what have you. So it'd be nice to be able to do a lot of that functionality without, having a hosted helper file somewhere or generating a helper file. Just replace it with a
yeah.
persistent data file. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
So
And
another
it's
way that we used where you can make the data in the contain in that cache visible to the user is to use a layout calculation. The only caveat is if you're using scripting where you're updating that persistent data, you have to do a refresh window so that that layout calculation then updates. And it's pretty instantaneous. I did a couple of tests where, again, when I was looping through to see if when I deleted one, did the one disappear? And so it works. So you can use it in an everyday sense versus just a sort of set it and forget it. You could use it for things that are user visible. Except that if it's going to be changed at any point, you have to do that refresh.
Sure.
And that refresh would have to happen for every client. So that, like if the client coming back to that layout, you'd have to do the refresh. So it's a little wiggly there using it for that. I think using it in the background for these storing different information is probably the better use for it.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. Yeah, I'm excited to possibly break it.
right. Well, following up on what you were saying about being able to install the developer tools without installing server. One of the other points that um, they were talking about in this other video was that you can load that into your command line and then go into your AI, tell it it's running, tell it to go read the help section, and then tell it to actively go do something. So if you launch the developer tool, which you can utilize to do a patch to your FileMaker application, you could essentially, like, say, for example, this persistent data, say I went in and I wasn't sure of the names. I ran the XML to see what the names were, and I go, oh, you know what? I no longer need this one, and I edited the XML. I could then tell AI to go and make a patch file off of the XML change I made, and then go apply that patch. So it's a little bit of a workaround right now to get the AI to go directly into the system to make the change, and the file has to be closed in order for this to work. But eventually the thinking is that that's all going to be integrated, where you're just going to go into FileMaker, tell the AI to interact with the AI to do the patch. And because it has access to that catalog, it would be able to do it directly. So that's the hope but we don't know exactly how Claris is going to implement it, but that's sort of like we're in that finessed version, essentially. So we have the tool to do it, and using those command line tools locally you essentially could build routines where you could have the AI handle that automation. So, but again, your file would have to be operating locally. It would have to be closed. So there are some caveats right now.
Yeah, there's a lot that, I mean, there's, just looking at the releases, there's a lot in this release.
Yeah, I have to say, even though I don't do as much dev work as I used to, the number of times that I've gotten to figuring out how to do something, client wants to do X, Y, or Z, and I'm puzzling out how I want to do it, and then I all of a sudden get brought to a screeching halt because export field contents doesn't work on the server. Um, that has happened to me more than once for sure, and so the fact that that's been addressed and you have full flexibility to use that on the server now, that to me that's kind of a little bit of a sleeper one. I haven't heard that one get tons of comment, but there are times when the workarounds required, because that doesn't work on the server, the workarounds that are required can be kind of ugly and time consuming, I think. Um, so that's a fairly
I
big
have
one in my view.
that, like, well, I've had to do quite a few import from client files where the field names don't match, and I am super excited that we can now, under the hood, put a different name in
Oh yeah.
and be able to match against that name. That is going to be a super time saver for all those projects where you have to do an import. And no more, if you don't want to have a temporary table, you don't need to have a temporary table. Yeah, I think that's going to be super handy.
I thought it was interesting. I gave it a really quick try. I thought it was interesting the way they implemented that rather than do something not very flexible, like stick a new field on the define field dialog where you could put in an alternate name. The way they implemented that, where they basically you're defining the new name as in a JSON object, and that JSON object has four or more parameters in it that let you define the name pretty flexibly in different contexts. You don't have to have the same name for the sort dialog and the export dialog. You can change those names if you have an odd situation where you need to, and you can even use that to localize the names and have different names in different languages. So I thought that was pretty foresightful of them to implement it that way. It give you a lot of flexibility over that naming functionality.
Are there any automated or bulk edit commands for that yet? Any way to do that systematically?
You may be able to do that with the export XML catalog and then edit the XML and do a patch.
Yeah, I was just thinking that could be a really good use case for an AI integration to go in there and like nicely name all of the primary keys in a solution or something, right? In just one go. But
Yeah.
you would have to have like access to that over execute SQL or something.
Anybody notice the new PDF commands? I think those are also going to be quite helpful.
Yeah, agreed. Doing a lot of, workarounds for PDF manipulation. So I'm excited to start digging into those and refactor a few things at some point. Although, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I think there's going to be a lot of performance improvements to be had and less troubleshooting involved with those new PDF functions. So
Agreed. Definitely. Very helpful. They should limit the need for some external plugins in some cases, which is always nice.
yeah. The
Like I
first thing
said,
I do
it's
when I update is make sure that Monkey Bread is up to date and compatible. So can confirm that. Like if I know we're all pretty heavy users of it, but I'm pretty reliant on that plugin. So it's good to know that's up to date and supported.
I guess on the reliability front, it's worth pointing out. I've been on. I upgraded to 26 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I don't think I've had a single problem that I'm aware of. Um, and we do have one of our dev servers upgraded to 26, and I'm not aware that we've had any issues there at all either.
Yeah,
Um,
we've not had any issues with that yet.
yeah.
And I actually learned yesterday that this was worthy of note that officially FileMaker 26 only supports 22 and newer. But we've got a couple of coworkers who have had no problem whatsoever accessing as old as 20. So
Yeah, I
there's a
read
little
some
bit
of
more
that.
backwards compatibility than we thought.
I read some posts about that online in the last few weeks. Uncertainty around that, and the fact that some people have been testing it with older versions. And I I can't say that I read it all carefully enough. I know there's some people probably there's always people who are more cautious than other people, and some people are suggesting that using an unsupported older version is risky. But I've also not seen any reports of any actual problems that people are having. So it's an interesting. I don't know if Claris did that on purpose or accident, but it's an interesting. It definitely makes this transition easier if it turns out we can let people be on FileMaker 21 for some short period of time. It
And that's
definitely
my
makes it.
point, right?
Yeah,
Because FileMaker Pro is prompting people to update, and it's a little less of a concern for us now, if there's a mismatch between FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Server.
right. Right. Anyway, I think I did a little bit of poking around on the community forums and on FM Slug a week or two ago to see if I could see any consistent problem reports from anybody, and I haven't seen anything. So far, it seems like a fairly solid release. No known problems that I'm aware of. Well, that seems like a great overview of some of our initial looks into some FileMaker 2026 stuff. Thanks everyone this morning. Look forward to seeing you all in a couple more days. Next meeting.
Sounds good.
Have a good day. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you for spending your time with us at the FileMaker DevCast today. We hope you found something useful, something thought-provoking, and something to take into your own development approach. Things to help you be more productive and to allow you and your teams to get more done in less time. You can find us online at portagebay.com and filemakerdevcast.com. Also, follow us on our social media accounts at Portage Bay or at FM DevCast. Please let us know if we can help you or your company with modernizing your approaches and streamlining your workflow. We look forward to seeing you during the next DevCast.